Okay. Hello, I'm Gal from the Organic Recommendation team, and today I'm going to talk about some of our work processes with our clients. And I don't mean client builder X, but I expected the laughter to come down, to have a little pause, but I guess not. So some troubling work processes we have with our clients and how we try to mitigate and improve those. So who are our clients? We deliver organic recommendation to the widget, and our clients are mainly people who configure the widget. So it's mainly the GTOs, ad engine optimization guys who configure the widget for A/B tests. The GTO configure it for actual production. And the front-end developers and QA who usually install the widget for QA purposes on like test pages, just to see that the display works and the feature works and etc. So what is the organic recommendation? The simple organic recommendation is really complex as is. There are over 35 source settings just to configure the backend flow. There are many more to configure front-end stuff like display and stuff like that. So it's pretty complex, especially if you think about it as a black box. You're a GTO or a front-end guy, and you configure source settings, and then you expect to see some organic recommendation populating the widget, and you don't have a view of the backend side of it. So what are those settings configuring? It configures the product type, which recommendation are allowed. This is called the whitelist, some filters, constraints, and much more. So there are already tools to mitigate this huge problem, some tools to help configure the settings, and a little bit of visibility about the inventory in the form of a recent documents API. And that's it, more or less. And then comes the GCS. For the GCS, we provided a live demo for the keynote speech of the smart feed, and we created 3 new card experiences, which were new to Outbrain, and it was done in a short time frame, like about a month to develop end-to-end these cards, and it involved all our backend team and all the clients I've listed, from GTO to install, ad engine to A/B test, QA and front-end to do their thing, and product, of course. And these cards add additional features on top of the existing widget, so that's another complication levels. So what are those cards? The first card we implemented was the trending in category card. So as I mentioned, each card has its own features, which really translate to limitations about what this card can do. So the features here are, this card can only show recommendations that match the category of the documents it's installed on. So if the widget is installed on entertainment, the recommendations will only be entertainment stories. Additional feature here is we want to show only recent documents from the last few hours. So these 2 features limit very heavily the amount of inventory we can populate in this widget. So the difficulty here for the installer is to install this thing and then you don't see recommendations. Why? Is the installation broken? Is the organic system broken? Or is the widget operates fine, but just this limited inventory is the issue. Another experience was the podcast experience. So the challenges here were to serve podcasts for the first time in Outbrain. And it's pretty cool because when you click on the listen button here, you actually hear the podcast in the widget without going anywhere. I did it a few times. It's pretty nice. And one of the challenges here were the podcasts are delivered to our system through external podcast providers via RSS feeds. And in those places, we don't have any Outbrain widget pixel installed, which is how usually the app services team crawls the documents and brings them into the Outbrain systems. So they already had the systems to tackle this issue, but there were some new complication in the podcast world, which made it much more challenging, both for us to crawl and actually deliver those podcasts to the organic system, and the people who had to configure this fine system were our clients, the GTOs. It was pretty much a mess, and they didn't have visibility why they don't see the recommendations. And two things to note about podcasts are they're published much less frequently than regular articles. Podcasts are usually published once a week compared to political stories, which are published many times a day. And the image is often duplicated. For example, you can have one Warriors HQ podcast, and he has the same image here, and it's very common. So the final card we implemented was the highly weak lights. This card is showing the stories you might have missed. Yeah, whatever. So this card shows the recommendations, the stories you might have missed in the past few days. So what it does, it shows by column each day the top stories that were shown, and it's scrolled horizontally, so you can see a few days. And this widget can house up to 55 stories, which is huge compared to the regular 4 recommendation widget, which means a lot of backend processing. And one complexity here is it's common to all the cards in the smart feed. When you don't have enough recommendations in a card, the card can collapse, and another fallback card will appear in the feed. So, but here what we have is a much more complex logic for the recommendations, for the hiding, I mean. Because as you see, there are different types of stories. The large ones are very popular stories, and the regular one are just popular. And the hiding logic here goes like this. A day is hidden if there isn't a proper configuration of popular and very popular recommendations. And the whole widget is hidden if there aren't enough days. So again, imagine you're the person installing this card and it's hidden. It's pretty hard to know how many days were hidden and so on. The hiding, yes. Any questions so far? Cool. So just a reminder on the organic serving system. This is just a simple view. So a client opens a CNN page, for example, And to populate the widget with the stories, a request is sent to ODB. It sends a request to the organic system, which begins with the Rolex. And we house all of our organic stories in Elasticsearch. So what Rolex does is essentially build a query to Elasticsearch, which is filters and scoring to filter out the stories we're interested in and score them by their relevance. So by the way, these filters are usually very much dependent on the source settings that we mentioned before. Another thing to note is what is indexed in the Elasticsearch are the metadata fields of the documents. We don't really care about the content because that will be populated by the widget or just a link to the story. We have, for example, the category and publish date, which we saw is very relevant to some of the cards we saw before. So what I mentioned was a lack of visibility for our clients. So what is the visibility we have on our system? And it wasn't great either. As most of you, we have a Swagger dashboard. Ours is the API for Rolex is pretty heavy. We get a full request from ODB with all the settings and all the context of the document and many parameters. So when we want to mock a request in Swagger, we can't type all these parameters. What we do is just input document ID and widget ID, and that's enough for us to resolve all the things we need, for example, the settings out of the widget. And then for visibility's sake, so this request runs in Rolex the same as any other. It goes to Elasticsearch, and we write logs to the Swagger dashboard, very detailed logs about what's happening. And as you see, it's very clear what's going on, for example, for this ID here. And another way we could see like statistics about the Elasticsearch was to write an ad hoc query. And that's also great. It's a messy JSON format. And all of this blob right here only shows me a sample documents that have this field. So it's not great. So we wanted to improve our visibility and to provide better visibility for our clients to keep everyone sane. So how can we make the black box a little clearer and improve the visibility for everyone? So we had an idea. Elasticsearch is usually used as a visibility tool when you slap a Kibana dashboard over it to see the logs, for example. We used it as a black box recommendation engine. So what we did is just add a Kibana dashboard over it, and let's see. Let's see how it looks. Okay, so this shows us a live view of the organic inventory in Elasticsearch. So what we can see is there are 6 million documents available for serving across the network. And we can use all the pretty nice Kibana visualizations to do slicing and dicing of our index. For example, we can see the distribution of the age of the stories, the distribution of languages, categories, and a lot more stuff. So let's say I have an issue with this trending in category card, which, as we mentioned, the inventory for him is very, very low. So I'm going to install this card on CNN. So now I filtered only documents in CNN. That's what we have at this moment. I'm installing this card on a politics page. So this card can only show politics recommendations. So this is the inventory it has. And we said the stories can only be from the last few hours. So let me filter so there are 5 stories at CNN about politics published in the last 5 hours. And it makes sense because stories aren't written every millisecond. People actually have to think and type those down. So if I see the same recommendations in the widget, so now I can know why without needing to look at our Swagger API and things like that. So we already have clients in Israel using this dashboard, and they seem pretty happy. We're also delighted we can use better visibility than this. So now I'll switch to a totally different subject, but it also suffered from the same issues. Our interaction with the GTOs, lack of visibility, but on a different matter. So fill rate is a critical KPI for our team. It means we're not serving recommendation, and it's very visible to CNN, for example. So it can have generally two causes. By the way, any questions so far about the previous dashboard?
Did you add any special fields to Elasticsearch? Like, for example, I saw that you showed category politics, 17 of them. You can index also the name of the category. Did you do special customization for that?
Yeah, so Amir asked if we added any extra fields and maybe more displayable fields to the Kibana index. No. But all the values today are pretty known. We can do it, of course, but it wasn't even presented as a requirement at this moment because everyone knows that 1708 is politics, of course. So for a fill rate issue, by the way, we get a pager duty on fill rate issues, of course. And it can be the root cause can be one of two things. Some critical system failure or on our end, or an installation issue that means that we're not serving recommendations on that installation, and it can be a real issue or maybe a false alert. So how do we pin down these installation issues, and why do we care about one specific installation? So if this installation receives enough traffic, for example, CNN or some huge NTD, it can actually be enough to move the overall fill rate needle and cause a pager duty for us. And it can be important and maybe not. So so we need to solve this problem. One issue is it's how to pin down. We have an alert on the system level, fill rate is down, and it's hard to know what's causing it. And even if we drill down and find a specific widget that's causing it, we don't have anything to do except notify the GTOs that own this installation, and and try to work with them on how to find the setting or the inventory issue, but we can't fix it ourselves. So at the time this issue was the worst, Amir, our newly elected guild leader, was in the organic team. And like a Christmas story, we came one morning and he presented us with a Grafana dashboard showing us that tracks exactly the top installation fill rate issues, if there are any. Now, he did it over Grafana and Prometheus, which isn't that easy to do because Prometheus isn't built for that. There are many, many combinations of source and widget, and you can't keep counters for every one of them because Prometheus will crash. So what he was able to do is just keep a fixed amount of counters that track the top installations by traffic and switch each time one new installation pops up. So it's fixed counters to track dynamically the top installations. So let me show you that dashboard. Luckily for me, today we had an issue, so I can show you exactly how it looks. So this is the overall fill rate needle. So at one time it was 100%, and here we have a slight issue. And here it goes back to 100%. By the way, the pager duty is like over 95%, and this is a very, very severe issue. So what I would look first is there a system crash? And if not, is there an installation that's causing it? So luckily for me, oh wait, this is the dashboard. Now I can see exactly which source and widget is causing this issue. These are the amount of requests that aren't fulfilled. And this is exactly the source of it. So I can go and notify the GTO very quickly about where it's happening. We can immediately open the AMPAM and look at the source settings of this widget and try to figure out what's wrong with it. And that's really nice. So what we see here is the publisher, the source, and the widget. What we need to go to the settings is just the source and the widget. Those are the key, and the value is all the settings that are configuring the widget. So that's it. I can take this, go to AMPAM, and start looking at the problem. Either that, or maybe something in the inventory change. So I can go here and first I go to AMPAM, look at what's the whitelist that configures the inventory, filter it here, and then I'll start to get a grasp about what's happening. Maybe the inventory is empty for some reason. Now, you're right to say that it can be hard to find the problem in the settings. So as we saw, there are over 900 settings, and okay, go find the issue. So I'll get to that. And so these metrics gradually evolved over time to more and more tools. So first we could eliminate the top noisy installations from our PagerDuty and sleep much better at night. Then we could configure alerts over these issues. For example, what we saw today, in the morning, we got an alert showing us, okay, in mobile POSI, in widget 780, there's an issue, you can go check it out. And finally, we communicated this after doing some back and forth with the GTOs over it. We directed the alerts directly to them because they're the stakeholders of the widget, and now they're getting the alerts directly and can action on top of that. So the next evolution was this.
Granularity of publisher source widget does it cause the load on the metrics system?
Yeah, so the question was, does the metrics cause load on the system? So as I mentioned, there are only a fixed amount of counters. We're not tracking every source and widget in the system that you... Yeah, it's implemented by Prometheus labels. By the way, each label is translated to a metric in Prometheus. So the Cartesian space that we use is it's small and fixed to track the, let's say, 30 top installations. Yeah, it's actually pretty generic. It can be used not just for installation or widgets, because it just it can track frequent events, like top events. That's what it does. And the class is really generic. It's unaware that it's tracking installations. I'm not going to tell you.
Maybe it's a good idea, right, to write some content about it and publish it. What's your use case? What do you track users in the API? Something you can't use today. The label space.
Cool, so we can move it to an external lib and share it. So after some time using this system, we noticed that many of these installation alerts come from common configurations. Like 2 configurations out of the 900 settings can cause an issue. And we saw that many times it does. So we thought about how can we be proactive and not just reactive. And since the settings are known and static, we could think of a system that would validate them statically. So a year ago in the hackathon, Nurit Moshkovitz from the FIT team and I did a POC of such a system because we believe that automating this, the installation guide is much better than the documentation we have today, because as you know, it's really hard to maintain and follow documentation in any aspect, especially in a 900 configuration system. So the idea was to create rules on valid setting interaction, and then to go installation by installation and validate if the installation holds. An example for such a simple rule is this. There's a setting called same source only. Give me only recommendation from the source I'm installed on. Nice. It's like setting 800, for example. There's a setting, there's another setting number 7, I think, that's called exclude same source, which means don't give me recommendation from the same source. So as you can see, if they both are turned on, you won't get any recommendations by design. So a rule that can be applied across all the system is if this is enabled, this should be disabled. That's it. And so in the podcast card, I've mentioned that there's a real duplication of images there. And we have a filter that doesn't allow image duplication in the widget. So for this card, what we want to do is to disable this filter, because otherwise it will only show us one recommendation, the first image, and then the other ones will be filtered out. So this is another simple rule we can define. So what we essentially do is we codify the installation guide. So the installation guide is documented in Confluence with exactly this, like setting this should be that. And then we create a logical rule, and we can go and validate it on the settings database. So the killer features of this system are to go offline and find and fix all the existing installation we have in Outbrain. And in online, what we can do is, if I'm coming to create or change an existing installation, I can very quickly go over the rules and see if I'm breaking something. And if I do, it won't allow me even to save this. It will pop up a nice description of the issue, and then I'll know what to do. And we already had many teams write the setting rules that apply to them. Each group has its own subset of settings that they are using. So this already moved into production grade by the Go product team and the efficiencies team. And I'm gonna clear the stage for them to present the product.